my name is Lisa Harder, and I am a graduate from 1983, which I don't even want to think about how many years ago that was. But um, I I am for the last almost, I would say, 30 years have been. I'm a major gift officer, is what my title is, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a fundraiser. And I currently work for an organization in Washington, D.C. called the Carnegie Institution for Science. And so I help people interested in giving philanthropically to the many science programs and all the research that we do, both in this country and around the world. Things like, traipsing around Iceland, researching all of the volcanoes there, and inserting sensors and to try to determine when the next volcano is going to happen. Or we are big sponsors of the Giant Magellan Telescope that they're building down in Chile, so that we'll be able to explore our universe and beyond. So there's a lot of exciting science that I help raise money for. And just real briefly, how I got here, I got an art degree at the University of Arizona. I was an artist, and then I got a minor in vocal performance. So I'm a singer. Not necessarily things that you think would fit with being a fundraiser at all. And in fact, I didn't even know what a fundraiser was when I was in college. That would have never made any sense to me at all. But, you go through life, and I basically couldn't feed myself drawing, painting, and being an illustrator. I did make a little money singing, but again, not enough to survive. So, through the course of my life and with doing lots of volunteer work, because I was always interested in trying to help people. I know that sounds kind of glorified, but that's really kind of what I wanted to do. So I started volunteering. From there, people hired me. From there, I would just keep getting promoted and promoted. I worked in healthcare for a very long time. I would say a good 25 years of my 30 years. And I really, really enjoyed that. But it's really fun to work for science. So I would say, keep yourself open.
Well, Gabrielle, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Andy Quinn, and I'm a business school economics graduate. I graduated in 1994, which Lisa, it also feels like that was a million years ago. And every time I go back to campus, I can't fathom all the changes that have taken place and how much everything has grown and how Tucson has changed. So I am the managing partner of a consulting firm called McAllister & Quinn. So we have about 55 full-time staff. We have about 300 contractors who work for us, and we have about 200 clients. And about 70% of our clients are nonprofits. So we represent major universities. A lot of healthcare providers. So like folks as large as Mayo Clinic, MedStar Washington here in the Washington, D.C. area.
I didn't know that, Andrew.
Yep.
You're my neighbor.
And I live like literally 200 yards from Sibley Hospital. So,
okay.
Here in Washington, D.C., I live about 4 miles due west of the White House. And so my background is I graduated in 94. I came to D.C. And got a job on Capitol Hill. I interned for Arizona Senator by the name of Dennis DeConcini, who's still alive. He retired in 94, but when I started my sophomore year all the way through, and I interned in both his district office in Tucson, which he used to have an office on Broadway, and then up on Capitol Hill twice. And I kind of fell in love with that. And so when I graduated, I came here and I got a job up on Capitol Hill for a guy by the name of Steny Hoyer, who's the current House Majority Leader. So there's Nancy Pelosi, and then Steny Hoyer is right after him. And he was on the Appropriations Committee. And so I spent almost 10 years on his staff. And then with government service, I went to a law firm. I'm not a lawyer, and started lobbying, and then left in 2004. We're kind of two non-lawyers. My business partner, John McAllister, I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican. We're sitting there having lunch one day, and we're like, what are we doing in a law firm? Like, we're not lawyers, what if we start our own business? And I don't know if we were dumb enough or stupid enough or what exactly to think that we could do it. And we made every possible mistake you can possibly make in starting up the business. And we worked really hard. And fast forward to where we are right now. By the first quarter of next year, we'll be about a $25 million company. And so, I'd love to hear more about what you want to do with your career, where you're from, and what you're studying.
So I'm Brenda Ynez, and I'm with the City of Phoenix. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Public Transit Department. And I've had kind of like a career where I've stayed in communications. I started with the city about 6 years ago. But before that, I was with a consulting and law firm. So I've done a little bit of agency work. I also worked for a publishing company. But one of the things that kind of like I remember when I was little is that I would walk around with like a brush and I pretended to interview my family members and like pretended to be a reporter. So I was like, since I was young, I could remember like wanting to tell other stories. I really wanted, I wanted to do that. And I pretend, I was like live in front of the camera. And it's kind of funny, like the way that, my parents talk about it now, but I kind of stayed with that. And that's not to say that that's, a typical individual in communications. You could really do a lot with a communications degree or with, political science degree. I'm not sure what your degree is, but I'd love to hear more about it. But so I got my bachelor's from the U of A in 2005, and then my master's at ASU in 2012. I dipped my toes a little bit in news. I was at Reuters in New York City for a little bit, and then I interned at KOLD in Tucson, and I also did my capstone in Phoenix at ASU with Cronkite News. So I have a little bit of a mixed background. I've done hospitality, so marketing. Currently in my current position, I really like it because I get to talk to a lot of the working families, right? So since I work for the public transit department, I'm compiling messages about bus and light rail and talking to individuals that really need these services, right? So that's what I found that I love doing, is creating messages for individuals who, are dependent on some of these city services, and just watching, them know about like the latest program that we have, or, the newest route that we added on a Phoenix street. I think that's very fulfilling for me. So that's where I am right now. I'm happy to sort of share my experience and my story with you. So that way, hopefully, you're able to get a little bit more direction on where you're going to go.
I have some questions for you. So again, my name's Lacey. I oversee Alumni Career and Professional Development. And I work closely with Justin to bring these type of opportunities where students and alumni can connect and learn about different careers and get some career advice. So we do that through mentoring. We have our Bear Down Network. We have other programs like Justin's Job Shadow and Build Your Network program, because it's important. It's important to hear what it's like in these careers from people who are living it and breathing it every single day. So I have a question just to kick it off, and Gabrielle, you keep typing and plug them in there. But I would like to know about your career goals, and maybe what your career goals when you were in college, what they were, and how they've evolved into what you're doing now. And Lisa, I know you kind of started that just a little bit, but maybe there was an event or a person that made that shift for you, or Andy and Brenda, you could expand upon that too.
I worked the whole time I was in college, and I just did retail, and I loved retail because I love people, and I thought it was fun. And so then from there, I got married, and we moved around quite a bit with the Navy, and I just figured I needed, I wanted just to do more with my life. So I actually stopped working for a little bit. And the other thing that happened was my mother passed away, and she was my last parent. And I think now, looking back on it, I probably was rather depressed. And I remember that there was a day I just said, you know what, I'm not going to be depressed anymore. I want to start volunteering, and I want to start helping people who are way worse off than I am. People who don't have roofs over their heads, people that don't have enough to eat. I mean, I had all of those things. And so I, just started, doing what I could because I didn't have a job. And then I started working for a particular charity called the March of Dimes, because I did have this art degree and I did do computer graphics, and they needed someone to do their an event brochure. And so I volunteered to do that, and it was fun. And like 2 or 3 weeks before the event, they fired the event planner for something. And they asked me if I wanted to take over to kind of finish up the event. And I'm like, sure, why not? I'd never planned an event before besides my wedding. I had planned my wedding, and that went off without a hitch. And so I learned, but to my credit, I'm really organized. There's a lot of things I'm not, but I am very organized, and I like things in kind of set in a certain way, in which you have to do as an event planner. You just have to be on top of about 50 things at the same time. So anyway, it was a great event. And from there, they then hired me like part-time, and I stayed working with them. And then they hired me full-time. I stayed with them for like 2 years, and another charity, the Heart Association, called on me and hired me away for a little bit more money. So I worked for them for a couple of years. Then I went into healthcare, and I stayed there for a long time. I worked for, this was in San Diego. I worked for a large healthcare organization with multiple hospitals. And, but it was really fun. And I really, really enjoyed healthcare. And from there, when I moved to DC, I started in healthcare, but then I pretty quickly moved over to George Washington University. And I was an alumni director at the medical school there. So I still had I could still use my medical background, and that was necessary for that job. But then I could kind of see how doctors are made versus just having to deal with them already made. And so it was a super fun job. I was there for 13 years and only just 2 years ago moved over to the current job. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to find these really interesting positions that, that I feel like I'm helping either the community or some really important mission. And it makes me feel good about what I do every day. So that's important to me.
I wish I could tell you that it was some like brilliant plan I conjured up that I executed flawlessly. That would be a complete and total lie. I think like a lot of us, you just kind of fall into things and you're open to new opportunities. I mean, I was a economics major, and I was sitting in the Old Main eating breakfast one day, or rather the student union, and I opened up the Arizona Wildcat, and I saw that you could intern for a senator, which is like, I didn't even know you could do something like that. And so I called the office and I went down there, and they hired me. And when I started off there, I didn't even know you could intern in Washington, D.C. I must have been in the office like 6 months. And I finally had this, I remember talking to someone from the DC office, and he said he was an intern. I'm like, I didn't even know that you could intern up there. I think that, one piece of advice I just give you is that you don't always know where the path is going to take you. And you just have to be open, to new opportunities as they present themselves. But sometimes people talk to young people and tell them that there's like a certain way that it's going to work out. And I think if you look at the labor market when Lisa and myself and Brenda first started off, it's completely different for your generation, where you may be doing multiple different careers, coming back to school and upskilling in an area, going back to the workforce, which is really, it's both frightening and exciting all at the same time. And so I think the job market that Lisa and I graduate into and what those expectations were are very different. And all I'd say is, be open to a lot of those changes, because you never know where an opportunity is going to come your way.
I think that, Andrew hit it on the head. When I graduated, Gabrielle, and I was reading through your comments here about you just want to learn a lot of languages and travel and make life better for communities around the world. That's really, really awesome. And it's good that you have that idea, right? And again, yes, be open to a lot of different things. So when I graduated there in 2005, it was like a really bad job market. And 3 years into my first job, I think, yes, it was around the time of the recession, I was laid off. And I didn't even know what that was. I was like, what is being laid off? That was a new concept for me. I'd never heard about it. And I just, I didn't really understand what was happening, but that sort of led me into a different direction. It was a publishing company that I was laid off of. And that's when I sort of went into the direction of public relations. I said, I want to be able to have a set of skills, and I want to refresh my skills like Andrew was talking about. And that's why I went back and got my master's. I want to update my skills and use my skills in any company or any organization, right? So I think the skills that you're learning with creative writing, and I think you're doing global studies as well, I mean, those are very versatile. And so, you're able to use those in a myriad of ways, right? And that's how I feel like my communications degree also helps, is that in that I'm able to use like my marketing, my public relations, my writing, all of that experience with any sort of industry that I go into. So that's kind of what led me in that direction, if that helps a little bit.
Noticing, Gabrielle, that you are a freshman, that I want to applaud you in being at this meetup in the first place, and having these questions and wanting to explore and kind of, discover what is possible, because that is something that doesn't always take place at this early of a time for college students. So I think you're in a great place for doing that. And I think maybe that could be one thing too that the panelists might be able to speak to, is knowing that she's got a couple years and mentioned she's going to graduate in 2024. What recommendations would you have for Gabrielle, things to do while at the university to leverage the travel, communications, these types of things to get her some experiences?
Intern.
Volunteer. Go find a cause. There are plenty of very, very worthy organizations there in Tucson, really wonderful ones that would love your help.
Yeah, and I think traveling, it sounds like you really want to travel, Gabrielle. I found that traveling really opened up my eyes and opened my perspectives, whether it was for, the stories that I wrote. It really helped me. When I was in grad school, I was chosen by the school to go to Brussels. And I didn't intern, but I was at the European Union for about a week, talking to the public relations folks that essentially, do PR work for the European Union. And that just opened my eyes into like all the strategies and the different tactics that they use in order to put messages out. I'm putting out messages for communities here in Phoenix, but they're doing it for, a much larger audience, many reporters. So I think traveling really also helped me, being in New York and seeing like the way that the Reuters newsroom was run. I think that helped me just sort of open up like my mind as to the many different perspectives as far as like my writing and the stories I was putting together. So yeah, if you can, I know traveling is expensive, but if you can find an organization that is willing to help you pay for it or, subsidize it, definitely go for it.
And I'll just point out here, Gabrielle, I mean, there's a consistent theme between our panelists, and they just try things and they get their hands dirty, and they might not know everything at the same time, but as you start experimenting and getting involved with organizations or different job functions, you find out what you like and what you don't like. I love Lisa's story about, she has a passion for music and for performing and the arts, but that just wasn't going to pay the bills. So,
but I still sing now. I do still sing. That's the one thing I still do.
Yeah. And you apply them to, other areas, right? And those passions don't go away, right? Those values don't go away, but you can apply them in different ways. And So I think that that's an important point to make as well.
And you can see, she asked Gabrielle's question, is interning same as being a student worker? She is employed on campus, which is great. But no, they're not exactly the same thing, Gabrielle. In some cases, I mean, there are internships available at the university within departments, but student employment opportunities, not necessarily as structured and related to the academic learning experiences, though some can be. Don't get me wrong. Just in general, they're not viewed as that. And so I think what the panel members are referring more to is to get some experience in outside areas. So these areas that you're thinking about, that you're curious about and have interest in, you don't have to make a long-term commitment. Right now you can dabble by doing some volunteer work, or internships tend to be time bound. So they would be over a semester or over the summer when you're not in school, and you would be on site at a location. You could choose to do that in a city, outside of Tucson even as well. Many of the internships are paid opportunities, so you will be able to be compensated for your time there. That is the focal point, is really to step outside of that university experience now into the industry that you have interest in, and get some exposure there.
And Gabrielle, I mean, just one thing that's really changed, in my opinion, from on the interning front, is it used to always be in person, and now look at this meeting that we're all having here tonight. Is we have probably usually about 10 interns at any one time at our firm, and they all used to be in person, and now with the pandemic, I didn't go into the office today. This is my basement, that I think is really opening up the aperture for you to consider to go well outside of Tucson. You could be working with a human rights group based out of New York and giving them 15, 20 hours a week, remotely, during the normal semester, versus, a lot of the summer internships are a little bit more competitive. In particular, a lot of folks, they want folks who are more juniors and seniors, who are a little bit more seasoned. But I think the great thing is that you're starting this discussion early. And if there's an organization that interests you, even if they don't have an internship, it's worth contacting them and just say, look, I just really love your values, and I think you're a great place to potentially work. I could give you 15 hours a week of just making up that, and I could do something remotely. That is incredibly valuable to you. But I think the big thing is to start, because a lot of times these internships build on one another. And so you intern at one place that maybe is not as prestigious, then you go someplace else that's even more prestigious. And then by the time that you graduate, all of a sudden you've got substantive work in multiple different organizations, and you're showing them a career progression. And as someone who hires people, when I look at that on a resume, that really sets them apart from someone who they might have a higher GPA, but they have no tangible work experience. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes getting the right job is a competition. And if you're looking to put yourself in the most favorable light, doing stuff like that is a real differentiator for you.
Gabrielle, keep putting the questions in there. I have a question. So we've talked about internships and getting, a lay of the land within the industry. Maybe we could share a little bit about each of your industries. Could you maybe describe like a project or something that you've worked on that can maybe showcase your work and something that you're proud of for your career?
So one of the things that I'm really proud of in my current position that I've been able to do is we have a program called the Transportation 2050, Gabrielle program, Transportation 2050. And that program, it was a proposition. It was a little bit of a tax increase that was passed in 2015. And that was around the time that I started with the city. So this little bit of money essentially helps communities get some sort of local funding for transportation, right? So to buy new buses, to be able to expand routes for certain areas in the community, to expand upon light rail, right? To sort of look at the the whole city of Phoenix and say, okay, our public transit system is here and this is where we need to go and this is what we need to do. So that program is something, so I started working on that program, whether it was promoting information about the, how we were using the taxpayer money to make these increases in service or expansion. So to me, that's kind of been like my, my biggest accomplishment at the city, that I've been part of that program since it started, and I've been able to work on reports. I've been able to put together videos. I've been able to put together stories and tell the community, hey, this is what you approved. The voters of Phoenix approved this program, and now look at all that we've been able to do. We've been able to buy this many buses. We've been able to put more light rail. We've been able to put more bus shelters. It's hot in Phoenix, so you want more bus shelters out on the street. So it seems like, a lot of these little things are sometimes not seen. That's why for me, I feel like it's been very fulfilling to be able to work on that and promote all of the things that we've done under that program. And again, it's been 6 years that I've been at the city of Phoenix. And so I've kind of seen it, from when it was passed by the Phoenix voters to now. We've worked on our fourth report, which, is very transparent. We like to make it interactive and, very visual with a lot of photography. So it's really, it's something that I get excited about, being in my position, and also excited to tell the community and ask the community. Like, a big part of it is listening to the community and see what else they want and what other changes in public transportation they want.
So what I do as a fundraiser is, and this is just kind of the way I look at it, and I think any successful fundraiser needs to look at their job like this, is that you're doing something or helping someone do something that's so meaningful to them in giving to a project that means a great deal to them. So in healthcare, it might be, someone's child survived something because of what a doctor did, so they want to make a gift, and so I could help with that sort of thing. What I do now, it is certainly very, very different from healthcare, but people are very interested in science, and I have to say, science has been a very good thing for all of us lately. And so, even though we don't do healthcare specific stuff too much, people there are large groups of people who just really do appreciate science and the discoveries that we're making. So this just happened last month when I was there in Tucson, and I was on vacation for my governing board activities, but I had two Carnegie meetings, two work meetings there, because these people lived in Tucson. One lived in Tucson, one lived in Green Valley. And one was a former postdoc. He probably was a postdoc in the 70s at Carnegie in DC. And now he lives out in Green Valley. But he had this very well-known career doing terrestrial magnetism sort of things and geophysical stuff, and just a really, really interesting elderly gentleman and his wife. And so I took them to lunch. I had met them one other time before. I brought them to Tucson and done the tour of the Mir Lab. Anyway, but this time I just sat down and had lunch with them. And I always just ask questions and then listen. That's what I do. And so I just said, would you ever be interested in leaving a legacy for Carnegie? I know it was really important to you. He goes, yeah, I gave him his start. He went to college and then he got his postdoc at Carnegie. And then he went on to have this incredible career. He said, they gave me my start. So he said, yes, I'd like to do that. So he is going to be giving us $250,000 to help endow another postdoc who works within his specialty in terrestrial magnetism. So that was very nice. But the other meeting was with this woman who is the widow of he worked with the Mir Lab, but he was also connected with Carnegie. So he just died a couple of years ago. I think he was probably close to 70 years old, but he was like an avid athlete and mountain biker. And he unfortunately had a bad mountain bike accident and died. So I scheduled a lunch with her, and we talked, and I just said, would you be interested in doing something in honor and memory of your husband? And she said, yes. So I listened, and she is going to do a $2 million bequest. And then just this past week, I chatted with her again. And this time I brought on the director of our observatory. So this gentleman had worked with her husband, knew her husband well. And he's in Pasadena. That's where our observatories is. So they lived in Tucson, and he worked at the Mirror Lab, but he also worked for Carnegie in Pasadena. So they had a house in Pasadena, but she didn't like Pasadena. So she just stayed in Tucson. So she loves Tucson. But at any rate, I brought this director on, and the three of us talked, and she got emotional, I think, seeing someone that reminded her of her husband. And she agreed she wants to start giving gifts now. So she's going to make annual gifts of like $50,000 to go to help fund. He was an instrumentation astronomer. So he helped build telescopes. And so we have postdocs who do that. And so she wants to start giving money every year now, like $50,000 to help with the expenses of those postdocs. So I think Carnegie should be pretty happy with me. I've been there 2 years. I've had a really good month. But it's all about finding out what's going to be significant and special and meaningful to others, and just helping them out with it.
Gabrielle did have a question for you, Brenda, in the chat there. And she talks about the being bilingual, and how do you navigate that with your work? And maybe you could address that. And if Lisa or Andy, you have any experience or insights, you can add those too.
Yes, so I do use my my Spanish speaking ability for work. I can interview in Spanish and in English. So whenever the media reaches out to us, since I am the spokesperson for the department, I take the Spanish interviews. I can translate, a press release into Spanish. So I do use it. I use it for social media. When we have larger projects, so if we have a 100-page report, we usually farm those out, when that means, we have a contractor who helps us with those, but they always like to have me kind of review them for quality check purposes. So it's good that I don't have to do the bigger jobs, if you will, because those would be my entire job. But I do get to do more of the fun stuff, like, for example, the media interviews and the social media. And if if I'm out in the community doing at a public meeting, or just on the bus, if I'm on the bus, I will get approached quite a bit. I think almost 30% of our bus ridership in our community is Spanish speaking. So that comes in handy. I would say if you have the opportunity to learn more than 2 languages, go for it. I tried to learn French, and I kept mixing in my Spanish. So my French teacher would be like, you can't just mix in Spanish, Brenda, and it's not French. So anyway, I didn't have much luck with French, but I am kind of trying to do a little bit of Italian right now. But I like learning languages. And of course, if you are wanting to travel, that's only going to help you in your career.
I took actually Russian when I was at Arizona, and I think I took 3 or 4 semesters of it. I'll be honest with you, languages are not my strong suit. And I don't think today I could even order off a menu or ask where the bathroom is. But when I was taking it in college, actually my first internship on Capitol Hill had a lot to do with foreign affairs, and actually having that was helpful. It certainly cannot hurt, and I think particularly it looks like you want to do a little bit of an international focus, and that would certainly be helpful. And Gabrielle, have you thought about studying abroad?
And the university has a great study abroad program. Really, really great. And Gabrielle just put in the chat there that she does have plans to work and study abroad. So that's great that you're already thinking about that and planning it.
You are light years ahead, I would say, Gabrielle, because I wasn't doing that. And that's one of the things, looking back, I wish I would have started a little bit earlier. I don't think I started thinking about internships until like my junior year as when I was working on my undergrad. So great. I mean, that's awesome. You're like doing all the right things already. And Costa Rica would be amazing. I mean, I've been there just for vacation, but that's one of the countries in like Latin America that I'd love to go back to. Oh, yes. Please let us know how it is if you do end up there, like for a while.
Well, maybe it's that feeling of being behind that keeps you motivated to continue to do things, Gabrielle. And I wouldn't want you to lose that fire. Don't lose that flame, because that is necessary. That's part of the formula for success. But I would tell you, just after looking at your handshake profile and knowing your attendance here today and your curiosity, that you are, I think, definitely on the right path, and you will, figure this out, because it's not something that you'll necessarily know right now immediately, as you heard from everybody as they talk, but you are the type of individual that will continue to move forward and explore and find your path. And this is really how you do it, by continuing to, consult folks and learn.
Yeah. Lisa, Andy, do you have any kind of final career advice that you'd like to share as well?
I mean, it sounds like you're well on your way though, Gabrielle. And I know Catherine, you are too. And I'm thrilled to be able to help as much as I can. But truly leave yourself open, and be flexible is the best. I suffered from being, I think, very rigid, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then when that didn't happen, I kind of like, yeah. So I think just go into this, especially being so young or being, so early in your schooling, you've got the right attitude and you're doing everything right. And Catherine, I think you're so privileged to be able to have this opportunity to really dig in and find out what you want to do. So I'm so excited for you too.
Well, I guess the only advice, at least I think that's wonderful, is, there's no such thing as a small job, only small people. And I really do believe that is every single job, even jobs I hated. I used to be a doorman at O'Malley's and have to throw drunk people out of bars in college. I used to work security at the football games and the basketball games to earn money through there. I used to wash dishes in a sorority house. And to make ends meet. And so, but I will tell you, every single one of those working experiences, when I actually did graduate, those jobs that I had in college were actually, in my opinion, very useful, because you could make mistakes and it wasn't like a terminal thing. Is that like, if you show up late, you get yelled at, in the kitchen by the house mother at the sorority house. Well, guess what? Like when I showed up for my first job post-graduation, I would never show up late because she used to, yell at me if I was five seconds late. So little things like that is, you can definitely get out of it. The other thing too is that I don't care what the job is when you go into it, Gabrielle and Catherine as well, is figure out what you want to get out of it. And it could be exposure to a field. It could be an industry. It could be a skill set that when you walk out the door 2-3 years later, or however long you may be at that organization, that you don't have right now. And, really attack those jobs that you have. It's like, what do you want to get out of it? And it's not just the experience. It could be skills. It could be contacts. It could be whatever. And I think if you go into that, so when you walk out the door, whatever that opportunity is, you're better for it.